Спасибо большое. Очень приятно здесь. Все. Я хотел бы еще говорить по-русски, но я знаю мой по-английски еще. I'm sorry. So we will continue in English. Make sure you're programmed and listen on to me. So it's a great pleasure to be here in Moscow. I love Moscow. Actually, I love Russia. I've been many times. And it's a great pleasure to talk about the future of media. If this is all about the future of media, however, I want to just make sure you're not expecting me to help you understand how to do marketing, how to do automated messaging. What I want to do right now is open up your minds and give every one of you something that you're going to want to go back and listen to or check out when you're back home. I want to give you something to inspire you, make you feel awesome, have a lot of energy in what you're doing. So, quick question. How many of you feel like you know everything that's going on out there? How many of you feel it's a little complicated to understand everything that's going on out there? Everybody else is lying. Well, it's not surprising because actually out there are, how many startups do you think there are happening right now in the world? How many? 1 million? 20,000? 10 million? We're starting to get important. 100 million startups are happening around the world every year now. So it's very normal that you cannot understand everything that's going on. So the issue we have in business is we need to innovate. We need to have great products and services. The question is, are you part of the innovators? In a survey that we did this year, looking at interesting innovations around the world, taking 2,000 of the best, 51% of them were coming from startups. Universities, amazing the amount of innovation that's happening out of universities. But then you look down at this little number 6. Anyone working in big corporations? Anyone feel good about that? So the issue is we need to innovate, but the innovation isn't happening where we are. How many of you guys are excited by everything that's going on in new tech? Yeah, good. How many guys feeling a little worried about new tech? Yeah, ooh. Well, here's the thing. The way we think about it is going to condition the way we operate. So we need to bring our positive mind and our excited sense, our self, into the way we innovate. So where are we going in this crazy world? The human condition is a need to decode and act on reality. Ever since we began, we need to understand what's happening around us, the science. That's why our desire for scientific exploration is to understand this universe we're on. And it's about understanding and quantifying it into data. The famous German scientist, he said that only that which can be measured is real. Max Planck. He said anything real can be turned into data. So in fact, we now have so much data being created. It's unbelievable the amount that's being produced and processed. It's beyond fathomable for our mind, and this is this notion. But now that we're producing this data and we're using it on everything, everywhere, all the time, and by all the means. So it's very overwhelming for us, this notion of big data. The essence of this digital revolution that we're going through is that everything must be transformed into data to transform everything through data. So we have to take our analog bodies, everything that exists, turn it into data, and then transform it through the data. But then the big question is this: how do you do it? Who's doing it? Who's it for? And what for? And the other big question is, who owns it? And these are big ethical questions that I would argue are reasons and how we are going to help understand how to take care of this enormous digital revolution that's ahead of us. If some of us have a very negative approach to the way we're dealing with life and these new technologies, I understand that. But mine, I have a rather more humanistic, a more positive view on all these new technologies. I believe that man should be the ultimate point of reference, that man is the measure of all things, as Pythagoras said. We need to understand who we are as individuals, heart-beating, real individuals with an ethic or backbone. I think of this as a notion of Humanism 2.0. Even if we are surrounded by new tech, how can we keep the human element within us? And I think of this as the notion of we have to have a progress, but progress that is positive, not progress that is being malevolent. And secondly, I think that we can use technology to solve a lot of the world's problems. And if we can integrate a little bit of that in everything we're doing, we'll feel more motivated, we'll feel more energetic, and hopefully we'll have more motivated and engaged employees. So the keys to future-proofing your business are threefold. The first is you need to make sure that whatever you're doing has more meaningfulness, more purpose. And by that I mean having a North Star that guides you, a navigational system. The second is we need to have more responsibility, self-responsibility. I was listening to a documentary on Aeroflot yesterday, and it was about the great ice hockey. Anyone like ice hockey? Pavel Bure, you know him? Anyone know? Thank you. A god! Vancouver Canucks. He said, even then, we need to have more self-responsibility, and I think we need to bring that self-responsibility at whatever level in the industry, in the company you're working for, into what you're doing. And the third is collaboration. Yeah, we need to work together, but we need to work together with people we're not used to working together with, outside of what we're doing. And I'm going to quickly, in a span of 10 minutes, take you through 16 different examples and initiatives that are just rocking my world. And each of them represent meaningfulness, responsibility, and collaboration. So meaningfulness is not just good for the soul, it's actually good for business. In a survey that was done by published by the Harvard Business Review, companies that have more meaningfulness in their business had a 10.5 times better return than companies that did not. These are publicly traded companies. So actually doing good is good for business. I want to have a very human focus in the way we look at these technologies. So this first one is from China. It's called Yili Maitian. Yili Maitian, anyone commute to work in a bus or a train? And you're standing up like this. Well, it's very boring, but Yili Maitian, they made 200 buses, and this little thing you hold on to is a sensor that understands my heartbeat and what I'm thinking about. And if the way my body is reacting is not so good, it sends me a little message to my phone saying, you need to take some better food, make yourself healthier. What do you think? You like that? Stresses you. Who owns the data? Big question. Anyone have kids? I know you guys are all too young. Oh, gosh, some of you have kids. Okay. Are you guys, all right, those who have kids, do you love the way your children are using social media? Telephones? No. You guys, the rest of you are kids. But your parents are still thinking about you. So Oiti out of Switzerland, what they did is they have an application that allows you to understand how your children are using social media. And the reality is that, of course, it needs to be an educational process. But the idea is if your kid posts, for example, an image that maybe shows a little too much, then it gives them a little warning. It's a chatbot. And if you do it again, it gives another message. Again, using artificial intelligence improves the relationship. And then, of course, if it's a third time, it goes to the parent, and the parent can intervene. So there are people out there thinking about important ways of improving. Now I wanted to bring in another Russian, Mr. Pavlov. And so he, of course, he had this idea of conditioning. And so they have this really interesting idea where if you have a tendency, for example, you go to the fridge in the middle of the night and you have a little bit extra ice cream, and you think it's not a good idea. This little wrist will give you a little electric shock. To begin with at 50, but it goes up to 250 volts. And I understand at 250 it hurts. Perfect Christmas present for people looking for New Year's resolutions. The Pavlov. iPoli uses artificial intelligence, and we're going to talk a lot about AI today. iPoli is out of Australia, and this is for helping blind people to see. So they use their phone, they take a photograph, and then the telephone will tell them what's in the photograph. They're now working on a new part which actually says the relationship of the objects that are in the picture. So they're detecting things, they're intelligently processing what's happening in the photograph, and you can imagine what that means for advertising. So that's about making things that are meaningful. The second one is about responsibility. There are 4 things within responsibility. The first is you need to have responsibility for your learning. You are the best people to know what you need to learn. The second is you need to be responsible for your personal branding, your own presence online. The third is about your security. Do not delegate cybersecurity, and by the way, we're in a country where lots of that, but I was in Romania last week, and the same issues. You need to be responsible for your own cybersecurity, but here's the big one. You need to be responsible for your ethics. You need to bring your personal ethics at whatever level, whatever job you're doing in your company, to your job. Because we have a lot of technologies out there that there are no laws that tell us what to do. So we have to remind ourselves that we are human individuals. What is our ethical backbone to the way we want to deal with these new technologies? Is it all about the dollar, or are we doing stuff that can be more meaningful, more important, and more sensible for this earth? Darwin, he said that the evolution is crazy. There's a lot of things that happen by mistake. We have imperfections, and then the better of us survive. This is his whole thesis of the survival of the fittest. But now we're getting into a new world where we can craft and use technology to improve our biology, to the point where we have CRISPR, which can look at our genetic coding and understand and decode and recode and cut our genetic fiber. We're now at the point where for $100 you can actually have your own genetic reading and understand what's going on. So things are moving very fast. And we're doing it in such a way we can actually correct our genes. Is that a good thing or is it a bad thing? It's now a reality. The question is, how are you going to integrate it? A couple of interesting ideas here. This one is the notion of mimicking nature. Take great examples from nature. And this one is one of my favorites. It's out of the United States. It's by the National Institute of Science and Technology. And they looked, you know how a dog smells? Like this? Well, they thought that they must be doing that for a reason. We don't do that when we're eating food. You know, it would look very funny if we were like, you take a wine glass. Right? So they think that there's something going on. So they actually mimic the way a dog's nose works, 3D printing. And of course, dogs' noses are able to detect many things, including bombs and drugs. So instead of sending out real dogs, they now can send out these artificial dogs who are able to actually sense bombs. Isn't that a cool way to use your technology? In Japan, we know we have a real issue with bees and the production of honey, right? Have you heard about this problem? So there are 2 different organizations working on creating artificial bees. This one out of Japan, where they're creating little drones, about 4 centimeters long, that can fly around and pollinate in place of bees. Then there's the idea of correcting nature. We're talking about artificial intelligence. Well, we're going to see a couple of examples here, but this one is Kaular out of Pakistan, where they are able to put on a collar on a cow. And because we still haven't found the intelligence to talk with cows, working on it, this color allows the farmers to understand what's going on with the cow so that they can anticipate a cow that's not feeling well and provide services using big data collection and prevention, which is a really much better way and much more humane way of dealing with the cows in this world, because we have so many of them, as we know. But we're talking about artificial intelligence later. I'm going to talk about artificial hamburgers, because they've actually created a way to recreate hamburgers. So you take the 5 initial compositions of a hamburger, and they're able to recreate them. This is called the Impossible Burger. Uses 95% less land, 74% less water, and 87% less greenhouse gases. And by the way, they do taste good. It helps if you have cheese and ketchup. And for those of you who like wine, going back to the wine image, they're actually recreating wine with ADV Winery. And here's what they're able to do. Instead of having to wait for the bloody grapes to grow, they just cook their own wine in the laboratory, making the recompositions, because all it is chemistry and a little bit of biology. And then you can get any great wine you want once you've mastered it. And the way they're working on it, it's not perfect, but they hope to have their first commercial wine at the end of this year. ADV Winery. So artificial winery, artificial hamburger, and artificial intelligence later. This is the modern meadow. So here, you know how important leather is. Any who work in the leather industry, they're now recreating leather, artificial leather, thanks to the modern meadow. They call the vegan leather. And of course, this has real implications on our society. If we can reduce the dependence we have on cows that do things for our greenhouse gases. Even humans can help us. We can be useful together. These are a couple of initiatives using some new technologies. So Kyron out of Germany, this guy is amazing. He and a couple of other guys have been looking at the fact that refugees who come into the country, it's a big problem. They don't have access to education, and we know that education is the way that we progress, especially for these refugees who actually, many of them are intelligent people. They're just in poor situations. So he's created a method to provide ongoing adult education for the refugees, which is a beautiful thing. But speaking about refugees, this is using a technology of blockchain. So this is out of Sweden, where they use a QR code to give refugees an ability to have an identity, and they use the blockchain to verify the identity and allow them to have a wallet with money for the refugees. Last set is on collaboration, and Robin Sharma said we need to align our video with our audio. We need to actually work with lots of other different people, because we cannot have all the expertises ourselves. So I want to show you a couple of examples of how you need to collaborate with other areas, other expertises. This one is robotics and virtual reality. So you use an exoskeleton, you put it around the body, and it enables you to understand what's going on, to feel the feelings of whether you're picking up something or you're walking for the first time. The applications are extraordinary. They could be used for medical purposes, but they can also very easily be used for gaming purposes. They're used for military purposes and for education purposes. The ability to make you feel something that you don't normally feel. And this is one of the examples of having better empathy, for example, something that we all need to create, and virtual reality can be a great way for that. A second is a combination that uses augmented reality. And this is again for using robotics, if you will. Any of you have a person who has missing an arm or missing a leg? Anyone know anyone like this? They have a thing called a phantom pain. So they may be missing their arm, but they still feel pain in their arm. And it's horrible because the arm isn't even there. It's all here. So what they do is they put some nodes on the head, and they allow the individual who's missing the arm to think that their arm is there. And then by a series of repetitive exercises, they get to reprogram the brain to think about how to control the pain. And as a result, there's massive drop-off in the amount of painkillers have to be used, and of course of the pain in general. So this is using technology for great things, but you need to use a lot of experts together in order for this to work out. The last one, this is my last one, is called Ico Creative. It's my favorite one. So there's a professor, he's from Colombia, and he sees a kid in his class that's missing an arm. And he says, that's a shame. But the worst is, all the other kids are teasing him because, you don't have an arm. You know how kids can be terrible. So he said, this is terrible. So the first thing he said, well, I'm going to make an arm that feels like a kid's arm, not an adult making a kid's arm, but a kid's arm, something that looks like a toy for the child. So he used 3D printing and other technologies to create a prosthetic arm for the kid. But he went further. He said he went to Lego in Denmark, and he said, could you help me make this prosthetic arm just a toy so that he could make it any toy he wanted? So he could make it be a sword or a lightsaber from Star Wars or a crane to pick up things. So what happens to his arm as far as the other kids are concerned? He's cool. Everyone wants his arm. But this guy went one step further. He said, does anyone like Lego here? He said, would you mind giving me a piece of Lego from your collection? So he asked all the other kids to give him a piece of Lego, so that the child that was without the arm, with his prosthetic arm, was making the cranes with their Lego. So it was no longer his arm, it was their arm. Now this is insight. And it's a beautiful example of how to collaborate with people. This is it. And he's a happy kid, it's moving. If you want to future-proof your business, we need to insert more meaningfulness, more responsibility, self-responsibility, bring your ethics and your personal sense of responsibility to your business. And the third is learn how to collaborate outside of the box with people you're not used to collaborating with. This is the list of things I showed you. I'll be putting this on some slide share, and James will help me get that out to you. This is my book called Futureproof, where I talk about all these things, hopefully inspire you. I look forward to listening to the rest. These are my connections. Daial, if anyone's on Twitter. I'm on ViContact, and I write at mindset.com every day. Thank you for your time.